Healing while still married is possible, but I don't really hear a lot of people talking about what it feels like to outgrow that version of yourself that your marriage was built on. To wake up and realize you change and your partner's looking at you like you're a stranger. I personally didn't leave my marriage, but I did choose me. And if you're married over 40 and figuring yourself out all over again, this video is for you. Hey, beautiful souls, it's Jennifer with another episode of Let's Talk About It Wednesday. I recently celebrated 23 years of marriage, and it got me to um, thinking about my healing, thinking about how that healing has impacted my husband and our marriage. I've been seeing a lot of posts lately about women in their 40s going through divorce. And listen, I'm never going to judge anyone for that decision or ask why, but I couldn't help but wonder, were they healing? Were they growing? And did they reach a point where they realize I can no longer honor myself and stay in this marriage? And I get it. Um, Healing inside of a marriage, that is a whole different journey. It's not easy. It takes work. It takes honest conversations and uncomfortable growth. And truth be told, there were moments I wasn't sure I can do both, and that's heal and stay in my marriage. But I've learned a lot, and today I want to share a little bit about my story. So I'm talking to women like me, over 40, married, but still committed, but not the same woman that you were when you said I do. Now, if that's you, pull up a seat because you're not alone. When I look back over my 20s and 30s, I realized I was running on autopilot most of the time. I got married when I was 21. I barely knew who I was. Um, Over the past years, I played so many different roles, which, wife, mom, student, employee, caretaker, peacemaker. But I didn't always know how to be myself. I was trying to keep everything together, the bills, the house, the marriage. I was chasing degrees, wiping nose, cooking meals, and managing and taking care of everyone else except for myself. And I know the world calls that a strong woman, a strong black woman, a superwoman. Um, but I wasn't strong. I was really tired and I was disconnected. And I was just really surviving. I didn't know what I needed because I never really asked myself, you know? I really thought that once I got the degrees, once we got the house and I got my dream car and the kids were older, that I would feel this sense of peace, this wholeness. But when I hit 40, even though everything outside looked amazing, something inside just, it felt off. Um, and it was like my soul was whispering to me, okay, you took care of them. Now it's time to take care of you. But in all honesty, I really didn't know how. Um, I ignored it at first, and I would fill space with busyness, the to-do list, just distractions. Because if I stayed busy enough, maybe I wouldn't have to feel what was really bubbling underneath. But it all caught up with me, like everything eventually does. And I hit a wall, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I did start going to therapy just to get some clarity, but what came next really shook me. I had a mental breakdown that I couldn't push through, and that landed me on FMLA for mental health. And right there during that time is when the real work began. And that was the work of resting, healing, and unlearning that survival mode. Um, I started to rest, not just my routine, but my entire way of showing up for the world. And something unexpected did happen. My voice started to sound different because I was setting boundaries for myself, and my reactions to certain things softened. Um, I wasn't snapping out of frustration or shutting down to keep peace, which is something that I did a lot of, which is not healthy at all. And my husband noticed. He didn't always know what was changing, but he felt it, you know. It wasn't just healing myself, it was really shifting the energy in our home. And for the first time in years, I was not running on fumes or resentment. I was reconnecting with myself. And that changed everything. That changed a lot. Um, there was one argument in particular with my husband that shifted everything. And normally I would, smooth things over, make things right, try to bring us back to normal. But this time I didn't. Um, I stayed still. I stayed quiet. And I didn't chase that peace, not because I didn't care, um, but I was learning how to protect my peace. And that silence, that calm, that was growth. That was healing. And my husband noticed, that was something different. And we had a conversation after that, and he told me that my tone had changed, that I was reacting differently. I wasn't reacting. I let him speak without interrupting. Um, I didn't jump in to defend myself and prove a point. I was listening to understand, and not to respond. Um, yeah, that was different. And when I say I was proud of myself, I was proud of myself, and I felt that that was a shift, that I had learned something and put it to use. Um, and those were the steps that, my therapist gave me to breathe through those moments, to ground myself, to stay centered so that I could stay present. And, all those tools that she gave me, they were working. Um, but what happened next in that conversation was more about us. He told me that he didn't know who I was anymore. And honestly, that wasn't wrong. I had to remind him that I was not the 21-year-old that he married. I've grown, I've lived, I've been broken down and built myself back up. And our kids are older now. The woman who put everyone first for so long, she was learning how to choose herself. And it was a hard truth for him, I think. But it was an honest one. And that moment cracked something open between us. Not in a destructive way, but in a revealing one. He was finally seeing the new version of me, and I was giving him a chance to meet her. There's a kind of quiet loss that happens when you're so focused on holding everything and everyone together. You don't realize at first the small pieces of yourself that start to fade. The things that once brought you joy, the dreams you used to whisper to yourself, the opinions you tucked away to keep peace. Um, One day you look up and you don't recognize the woman who's looking back at you in the mirror. You become everything for everyone except yourself, you know? Um, I lost interest in my hobbies. I lost my voice in some ways. And I gave up my desire to avoid conflict. But nobody warned you that finding yourself again isn't a weekend retreat. It's slow, it's intentional, and it's a deeply personal journey. But now, I go on lunch dates with myself. You've always hear me talk about journaling. I journal a lot more. I say no without guilt. I've stopped cooking every night. Everybody's grown. You could figure it out. And I started to prioritize my joy. Um, I'm no longer performing for approval, not my husband's, not my kids, not society's. I'm just being Jennifer. And that feels so good. Healing hasn't ruined our marriage, it's remaking it, Now our conversations go deeper. We don't pretend everything is perfect. We never have. We joke sometimes with each other. Like, oh, God, like I can't stand him sometimes. I can't stand her. She gets on my nerves. And it's so true. We get on each other's nerves all the time, you know, but we always choose each other, even when times are hard. So, to the woman who's watching this, married 10, 15, 20 years or more, who's changing, who's growing, who's afraid she's losing herself or maybe finally finding herself. You don't have to burn it all down to rebuild your life, and you don't have to leave your marriage to come home to yourself. You just have to stop abandoning yourself. Healing inside a marriage is possible, and if no one's told you, you're allowed to choose you and still choose love. But I'm not going to lie, healing while married isn't a straight line. Some days you feel empowered, like, you're finally becoming you again. And then other days it feels lonely as hell, like no one recognizes you, not even your spouse. But here's what I have learned: growth doesn't always mean leaving. And sometimes it means choosing to stay, but rewriting the rules for how you live and love. So stay tuned for part two, where I'm talking about what happens when we grow where we haven't healed.